right, good evening and welcome everybody here at the Chris Salcedo Show on Newsmax TV. To their credit, the Biden administration did learn something from Team Obama. At no time has Biden promised to be the most transparent administration in history. The leftists who run Washington are living down to our exceptionally low expectations. Team Biden is forbidding the fawning press from visiting facilities where left-wingers accuse President Trump of keeping kids in cages. Team Biden is stopping the press from doing ride-alongs with our border agents. But that's not all the Biden administration is hiding. The liberal state bailout bill is packed with all kinds of surprises. The bill includes hidden taxes, massive spending unrelated to the China virus, and even funding for NGOs. That stands for non-governmental organizations. These groups have no loyalty to the United States. In fact, they often work against our nation and our people's best interests. Socialist Democrats made sure you funded these groups through USAID. $11 billion of your money went to U.S. foreign aid. Then some of that money is going to end up in the NGOs' pockets. Congressman Matt Gaetz says that's a problem.
What I can share with you, Chris, is that I've got intelligence directly from Northern Triangle countries that these cartels, these waves of illegal immigrants, they aren't just being fueled by the organized crime in that part of the world. They're also being funded by U.S. taxpayers. That's right. U.S. taxpayer money flows through the State Department, through USAID, and that money is ending up in the hands of NGOs that are advertising for and facilitating the caravans and movements of people into our country. It's sad to admit it, but the U.S. government may be one of the biggest human traffickers in the world.
It'd be funny if it weren't so tragic. That's right. Joe Biden is harming the United States with his border crisis and using our own tax dollars to promote it. Unlike the Surrender Caucus and the GOP, I am no longer in the mood to play nice with these socialists, being as fair to the socialists as they are to us. That's the balance we dispense in tonight's preamble. We start in Georgia. Police arrested a 21-year-old Georgia man on Tuesday after investigators said he opened fire at 3 separate metro Atlanta spas, killing 8 people and injuring 1 other. The shooter confessed he was driven by what he called a sex addiction. That's what drove him to seek out these facilities. But despite this, socialist Democrats started to blame people like me and President Trump because some of the victims happened to be of Asian descent. Leftist Congressman Ted Lieu chimed in on Twitter. The former president used racist phrases, he wrote, like Kung flu, that inflamed discrimination against the Asian American community. Officials that continue to use ethnic identifiers in describing the virus are part of the problem. Please instead be part of the solution. Hashtag stop Asian hate, he wrote. Now, Mr. Lieu, this man, is a special kind of stupid. First, the Kung flu was a derivative of the martial arts discipline known as Kung Fu. It's practiced by many races all over the globe. Perhaps Mr. Lieu can actually identify what race Kung Fu is. It wasn't just Lieu who tried to make absurd claims about Trump. Joe Biden's spokesperson also chimed in on this.
I think there's no question that some of the damaging rhetoric that we saw during the prior administration, blaming, calling COVID, the Wuhan virus or other things, led to, perceptions of the Asian American community that are inaccurate, unfair, have raised, threatening, has elevated threats against Asian Americans. And we're seeing that around the country.
One side note here, the Chris Salcedo Show has been using the term China virus long before President Trump started using it. I'm going to be as fair to Ted Lieu and Biden's spokesperson as they are to me, to Trump and other conservatives. What's really at play here is that Lieu and Psaki and virtually the entirety of the Socialist Democrat Party are protecting Communist China. They're trying to say that our criticism of America's enemy is somehow responsible for an increase in violence against Asian Americans, when they know full well our target is the communists. That's who Psaki and Lieu are trying to protect. Any 5-year-old knows that China is a country, not a race. Any intelligent person knows that Wuhan is a city, not a race. So let me be as fair to Biden's spokesmouth and Congressman Lieu as they are to me and the president. These people are defending an inhuman regime that enslaves 3 million people. These Democrat socialists support China stealing the freedoms of the people of Hong Kong, and Democrats are already preparing to abandon Taiwan. Psaki and Liu are big cheerleaders and defenders of China's forced abortions. Both of these leftists support China's racism toward black people. Oh, this is fun. Let's go on, treating liberals like they treat us. Here's MSNBS star Chris Hayes.
There are a record number of anti-transgender measures in state legislatures this year, at least 78 in 25 different states, and many of them with strikingly similar language, using phrases like biological sex, biological males, sex listed on birth certificates, and the nearly 50 bills that would ban trans athletes from playing on team sports. And the first of those bans was just signed into law by Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves last week. It is set to become law on July 1st. I have been noting this, that, the two bills that Republican state legislatures seem most intent on in the year 2021 seem to be targeting voting and restricting voting and targeting trans youth. It really does seem like those are like the central policy priorities happening in state legislatures.
This is why Newsmax is so important, folks. If only MSNBS were allowed to dispense their drivel, people would think that conservatives are trying to stop American citizens from voting and stop transgender kids from partaking in sports. And Chris Hayes is unfair in his distortions of conservatives. So let me provide some balance and also dispense the same level of fairness to that liberal extremist known as Chris Hayes. The Republicans are trying to make sure that our elections live up to the American ideal of one citizen, one vote. Mr. Hayes opposes these efforts, so we can only conclude that Mr. Hayes supports cheating at the ballot box and for giving foreign nationals a vote in America. An odd play for a man who wet his pants for months over the Trump-Russia collusion that never happened. Conservatives, because they have a soul and a conscience, are working to make sure that America's daughters are not put at automatic disadvantage by being forced to compete with biological males for sports scholarships. Now, the science that Mr. Hayes appears to be unaware of shows that typically males are stronger and have a larger muscle mass than biological females. This gives males an advantage in many sports. Judging by Mr. Hayes' criticism of these efforts, we can only conclude that Chris Hayes of MSNBC is anti-women, as he supports putting the nation's girls at a disadvantage in nearly every sport. Again, that's us treating Hayes as fairly as he treats conservatives. Just like the Democrat socialists' cancerous cancel culture is predicated on fabricated slights based on the most outrageous and intellectually vacuous arguments, so too are liberals and their weak attempts to silence their political opposition through spurious and dumb predicates. What's amazing to me is that the surrender caucus in the Republican Party is inclined to surrender to these morons, afraid of being criticized by them. I can't see why. In my view, respect is earned. The American left has done nothing that would explain the timidity of some in the GOP, and certainly the American left has done nothing that deserves any respect. To you leftists, I say this: you reap what you sow. Now, let's get to your top stories. Mexican cartel crisis at the southern border. It continues to get worse and will get worse so long as Mr. Biden is occupying the Oval Office or wherever he's writing his speeches and writing his proclamations. Slashing more jobs in America. That is the Biden agenda, making Americans worse off, and he's fulfilling his objectives to the T. Blaming Trump's rhetoric, by the way, for things that, well, he's not responsible for. That's their stock in trade on the other side, and that's where we begin tonight. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki was asked why Joe Biden thinks there's been a rise in violence against Asian Americans in this country. Here is the press secretary again, pointing the finger at former President Trump. Listen.
I think there's no question that some of the damaging rhetoric that we saw during the prior administration, blaming, calling COVID, the Wuhan virus or other things, led to, perceptions of the Asian American community that are inaccurate, unfair, have raised, threatening, has elevated threats against Asian Americans. And we're seeing that around the country.
Absolute poppycock. Joining me now, former Republican Georgia State Representative Vernon Jones. Mr. Jones, now I think these left-wing extremists and their arguments are really devoid of any intelligence or reason. Am I wrong?
Well, first of all, let me say this: you're not wrong. But secondly, I'm a former Democrat, and I'm currently, and I will always be with the GOP. So I'm a part of the brand new party now. But you're absolutely correct. You know, let's look at what is happening here. The Democratic Party are using a high-tech method here, and that is they are doing everything they can to keep minorities on their plantation. Why? Because President Trump made it clear in his re-election campaign how he was able to get more minority support than any Republican president in the past 60 years. And for that press secretary to say what she said, to try to blame what's happening in this particular case in Atlanta without knowing the facts, all that she is saying is, look, here's another minority. Let's pour it on the Republicans. Let's blame it on President Trump. When in fact, that in particular gentleman, or I should say the victims, as I understand it, stand to be corrected, was not from China. They're Korean. And so, wait a minute. What did that have to do with the China virus? The China virus is real. That's where it came from, China. But at the same time, when you see them trying to create victims here that are not victims, that's what they're doing with voter suppression. They're saying that black people, white liberals are saying that black people need to have someone to think for them. Oh, this particular voter suppression legislation, you can't afford an ID. You don't know how to get an ID. Matter of fact, Joe Biden's already said you don't know how to go on the internet to search for COVID. That's why blacks are disproportionately affected by it. But why aren't they standing up for white liberals? They're going to be subjected to the same election laws. What makes a black person have to be told this is wrong, but they're not telling white people that is wrong? See, that's the maternal and paternal instinct of white liberals. They think they know what's best for black people. Let me take care of you. Let me do this for you. Matter of fact, let me build you a habitat house, but not in my community.
Yeah. You know, and hey, look, speaking as a member of the Latino community, I've had to deal with this kind of stuff my entire life, from white liberals telling me that they think I should support illegal activity because of the color of my skin. Because every single time a Republican or somebody decried illegal immigration, the breaking of law, they said, well, you must be racist. As if every Latino out there supports illegal activity. And that's what liberals think of us. And I think it's absolutely disgusting. I want to turn now to calls for Secretary of State of Georgia, Brad Raffensperger, to resign over a Washington Post story that alleged that President Trump said something he didn't say in a phone conversation between someone in Raffensperger's office. Now, Trump seemed to indicate that he believed the unreliable source used by the Washington Post for that fake news story was in Raffensperger's office. Now, tell me if you know anything about this, the identity of this person, and if we find out who this person is inside of Raffensperger's office, should he or that person resign?
Well, first of all, the Washington Post has done what many of the media do, liberal media. They come up with head liars. They're not headlines, they're head liars. The Washington Post completely lied on this president. They said they had a source. Well, why didn't they verify their source's information? It would have been easy for them to ask for a transcript from the Secretary of State. And another thing, too, why didn't the Secretary of State? He had to have known about the phone call. He had to have seen this transcript or even listened to it. Why didn't he immediately say, you know what, this is inaccurate. This is not what the president said. This is what you all assume. Here's the record. Here's the transcript. Now you got factual information, but he didn't do it. And see, that is what's bringing this cloud over election integrity. When you have the Secretary of State himself there and already cut a backroom deal to change election laws with Stacey Abrams, which he does not have the authority to do, that created it. And then to come and stand by and was intellectually dishonest with Georgians and the media that the president did not say this. So you know what this has come down to? Whatever happens, let's blame it on the president. That's what the media does. And all those media outlets who reported that same story, they were too lazy to do their homework. So they just repeated what another news organization said. And you know what? That's why I said the days of Walter Cronkite is over. You have journalists now who've become completely activists. You know who they support. You know who they don't support. It's not about news. It's about them carrying that same liberal agenda.
Vernon Jones, always a pleasure to talk with you, sir. Come back soon here to the Chris Salcedo Show. With socialists in charge in Washington, folks, many fear our military will be gutted again as it was under President Barack Hussein Obama. Some citizens are trying to help. We'll tell you who's giving back. Plus, mayoral candidate for New York City, Sliwa, kicking off his run for City Hall. We ask him how he'll crack down on rising crime and revive a police force that has been under constant attack from New York City Hall for years now. That's coming up next on Newsmax TV.